we have a caller on the phone, and it is our illustrious guest. And I'm trying to bring up some information here. Let me go ahead and... I want to give April the proper introduction.
Oh, definitely.
April March worked in burlesque from 1952 to 1978, performing all over the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and in England. She was called the First Lady of Burlesque, in part because of her resemblance to First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, mostly due to her ladylike behavior on and off stage, never crass or profane. April was the personification of the elegant stripteaser and became known for her class and grace. April headlined 2 Harold Minsky shows and Ann Corio's show, This Was Burlesque. On Broadway in 1964, April appeared in a short film made by Jim Henson, if that name doesn't ring a bell, Mr. Muppet.
No doubt.
The name of the film was called Timepiece. And more recently, you can catch April in the documentary Behind the Burly Q. April March, thank you, and welcome to the Mick Show.
Well, hello, Mick. It's a pleasure, my pleasure, and I hope I don't sound too froggy. I came back from Toronto. I come back from all of these venues with a bronchial and sinus infection. So let's hope I make it through the interview without sneezing.
Hi, April.
Hi, hello. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry that you're a little stuffy there, but it's nice to talk to you.
This is my co-host, Emia, and she was reading your bio just a little while ago, and we ran into you via Facebook,
right.
Social media, and how has social media affected your life?
Oh, my goodness gracious. I thought I was retired in 78, and all of a sudden it seems like I've got a larger career than when I retired.
Wow.
Yeah, you've got people, thousands and thousands of people who have sought you out and in a sense has revived your career.
Yes, it has.
So
and I'm glad, because it's wonderful to be back on stage again and talking to the audience and the spotlight. You know, once a ham, always a ham.
Always a performer.
Yes, that's true.
So, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the even better news is that you've now gotten around to writing your autobiography.
Yes, a gentleman from Boston, Dan Perez, has helped me with the book, and the book will be out next month. In fact, I just spoke with him about an hour before speaking with you, and I told him I read the manuscript that he left with me this past weekend, and made a few corrections and a few, misspelled names, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm excited about the book, and of course you heard about a drink being named after me, didn't you?
I heard something loosely referenced, but I didn't get all the details. What is the drink?
The drink, it's called the April March First Lady Cocktail. And a young lady by the name of Caitlin Rieger, who's the producer of Slice TV in Toronto and London, England, she met with me in July when I was there for the festival, and took me to lunch and did a 2-hour taping of me. And we became very close friends. So when 2 days after I got back home to New York, she called me and said that she had gotten in touch with a friend of hers who's a famous food blogger by the name of Meredith Smart. And Meredith concocted a cocktail for me. And when I was in Toronto this past a week ago, I had Sam, that owns the famous Cadillac Lounge. He made the drink for me. It was the first time I had tasted it, and I'm not supposed to because I'm on Coumadin, but I had to have my drink.
Of course.
Anyway, it's a wonderful cocktail. It's as pretty as it is tasty.
What's the recipe?
It's made with 2 ounces of aged rum, 1.5 ounces of framboise, and the juice of half of a lime. And you put it in a shaker with ice, and you shake it up, strain it into a martini glass, slice a raspberry, and put the raspberry on the rim of the glass. It's very tasty.
Fantastic.
So that drink is going to be all over the country, and it's going to be on the Cadillac Lounge menu for around $15 or $20. So
wow.
It's going to be an expensive little drink.
So nurse that drink.
Yes, nurse that drink.
Nurse the drink, enjoy it, and I would imagine they'd be serving it out in Vegas as well.
Probably. Well, I think Boston. When I go to Boston for the Boston Burlesque Expo, Scratch, Alex Newman, and the Boston Baby Dolls, they're going to try to get that as the drink of the expo at the oh goodness gracious, I can't think of the name of the hotel in the Hyatt Regency.
Okay.
So anyway, that'll be good. I can go out and shake up a few myself, I guess. But
no pun intended.
No pun intended. And then that Caitlin Rieger, when she gets back from London, she's going to bring a film crew to New York and film a documentary with me. And all sorts of good things are happening.
It just sounds like you're just as busy now in 2011 as you were during the 50s and the 60s.
I think I'm busier.
Yeah.
And at age 76, I made Penthouse magazine in the May issue.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was funny.
Well,
Leslie Zemeckis sent an article to Penthouse advertising the Behind the Burlesque.
Yeah.
And sent a photo of me clothed. And I was surprised because I had turned down Playhouse magazine, or Playboy magazine, years and years ago for $10,000. Here I show up in Penthouse, which isn't as elegant as Playboy, for nothing.
For nothing.
For nothing, right? But,
so you turned down Hugh Hefner.
I turned down Hugh Hefner.
You did,
but,
and not a lot of women turned down Hugh Hefner during his lifetime.
No,
you
they
did.
don't. Yes, I turned down Hugh Hefner.
And is it true that you've never appeared nude on stage during your burlesque act?
Well, I not completely nude.
Right.
In England, you had to have your G-string on a hook and eye, and you unhooked it, but the curtains closed and the light was very dim, and you stood like a statue. So.
Oh, that's right. I heard. According to the obscenity laws, you weren't allowed to move. That's right.
No, you couldn't move. And then in the theaters, in the later years, like in the early 60s, 70s, it started in where they wanted the star attraction to remove the G-string.
Right.
But I never would do it. I went bare-breasted, but I had feathers or a negligee on. I never stood or danced around nude.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And
Minsky told me years ago that a lady always leaves a little something to the imagination. So I followed that throughout the years.
Throughout your whole career, and well, I'll get to Minsky in just a minute because I was fascinated with his history and in your encounter with him. But wouldn't you say that it's obvious? It's safe to say, and you would agree with me on this, that the so-called sexual revolution of the late '60s pretty much killed burlesque? Yes.
It started, well, first of all, it started with the go-go dancing.
Yes.
Then it went into now I've seen some beautiful pole dancing done, but usually in the smutty clubs, it's not beautiful. It's lewd, whatever.
Lewd and
then the
lascivious.
lap dancing. I mean, how can you compete with the lap dancing and X-rated films on the screen in between burlesque shows?
Yeah, but there's so many facets of the burlesque genre that our listeners are just not aware of. When we think of stripping today, like you said, we think of the strip clubs where everything is nude, everything is gratuitous and in your face. But back in the day, it wasn't like that. It really was an entertainment complex. I mean, there were a lot of very famous comics who worked the burlesque scene with you, who were up and coming at the time and went on to become household names.
Right, and then, well, not only that, but see, another thing that killed burlesque in the later years, all of the comics have died out.
Yeah.
And there's none of the younger comics seem to want to take over burlesque comedy.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you crossed paths with them, but I mean, some of the names back in who got started in burlesque, you're talking about Jackie Gleason, Phil Silvers, Ed Wynn, Jimmy Durante, yeah.
But Abbott Lou Costello.
Abbott and Costello did burlesque for a number of years.
Robert Alda was a straight man. He was a talking man in burlesque.
Yeah. Yes.
And I mean, there was many people. I met Jimmy Durante, and we both came back on the same flight out of Wisconsin, and both of us, you could smell the cheese in our luggage. we both came back with. Of course, you don't come back from Wisconsin without cheese. So both of us had our luggage loaded up, and it was a little smelly on that plane. But
well, was it all blue cheese?
He loved burlesque people. We spoke for a couple of hours on burlesque.
Jimmy was an old vaudevillian. I mean, he goes all the way back to the vaudeville days, so he was on that circuit for a long time as well.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, there's just I think if you could paint the picture of a typical night of a club that you would work in, when a patron comes in and pays their money, what exactly are they going to see? Back in the day.
Back in the day?
Yeah.
Beautiful, coiffed women in gorgeous gowns and furs, and no lewd, lascivious shows, that's for sure.
Right.
Everybody, it cost a lot of money back in those days to be in burlesque. Now, like you say, they come on stage with nothing but maybe a little $5 nightie.
That's it.
You know,
something they can throw away.
Yeah, and a pair of high heels,
yep.
and that's it.
Yeah, that's their big investment is the high heel. That's it.
That's it.
That's where all their money goes.
Yeah,
but
in my time, it was all professional photographs from people like Kriegsman and Jean Laverne and Marie Seymour, and you had to keep those replenished, and then it was also very, very expensive for wardrobe.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean,
and feather boas.
And lots of
boas.
That was a standard fare. Was the feathered boa. When you think of burlesque, you think of the feathered boa.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But I instead of using the feathered boas so much, I was more of a one for a pretty duster, maybe with the boas, the feathers around the neckline or something like that. But when I took, I did a garter belt stocking act. And when I got up and I was just in pasties and G-string, I always had someone hand me the duster or feathers and had them around me, for the end of the act.
Right.
So, and I guess you know that a young lady in Boston that's with the Boston Baby Dolls, Amina Murray, she did a tribute to me this year.
Oh, no. I didn't know.
And She made a costume exactly like one of the red costumes that I have, and we worked together. And I showed her what how I did things. And I had a tune written for me called Blues for April. That was manuscript music. So Alec Newman, who has the Boston Baby Dolls, he went to a friend of his and had it made into a CD. So Mina did the tribute number, a 6-minute number, with my personal music and a replica of my gown, and she did a beautiful job. So
you've got a lot, especially through the social networking now. You have got a lot of young women who are just totally who are big followers of yours. They are disciples of yours because they want to know more about the burlesque era. They don't want to be the vulgar stripper with the G-string and the big heels now. They're seeking out they want to perform but they want to do it in a more classier way. So they're all coming to you and befriending you, and you're telling them the ways and how to go about it, the do's and the don'ts.
Yes, and they're lovely girls. They're nice, sweet. So many of them are college girls.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are working mothers. You know.
Right.
And they're just wonderful. They're wonderful, sweet girls. And so I try to teach the elegant striptease, and teaching them not to throw their wardrobe on the floor, but to have somebody there to hand it to. And
right.
if you can't put something pretty, make a pretty little cover for a chair or a bench or something, and go each time you take something off, go and drop it into the basket or a chair or whatever. Don't just throw it on the floor or
right.
throw it. It's distracting, and it's just, I don't know.
Well, it's not classy.
It's not classy. So.
Well, let's say a typical night, say in 1958, at a theater. What would the roster be? We would come in, we would sit down, we would be served cocktails. Was it the comic that would go on first? Because you always had an MC as well.
They had like a house MC comic, and he would get up, like a comic does today, and do his little bit, and then he would bring on a girl. And then after that girl, then he would do more comedy, and just keep, bringing the girl on, taking her off, doing comedy. And that's how it was in the nightclubs. And the theaters, of course, they had the comics, the talking women, and the striptease, and then the star of the show at the end.
Well, who were the talking?
Ahead.
What do you mean by the talking women?
The talking women were girls on the show that did their striptease number, but they also had to do the scenes with the comics. They had to change into, like if they did the doctor scene.
Oh, okay.
They'd dress as nurses, and they'd go out. They'd be the foil for the comic.
The comic foil, exactly.
Yeah, the comic foil.
Good. Yeah.
So it was, and they never, the comics back then, they got lots of laughs without being dirty or using dirty language. It was all, double entendre.
Right,
stuff.
Exactly. It was all suggestive. They never had to use the F-bomb or anything like that.
Exactly. Like, now the one time, one of the things I'm the most proudest of is getting into Sports Illustrated. And when I was in the choreo show for 6 weeks in between my Minsky shows, and threw a press party for me. And I met the editor of Sports Illustrated. And I told him, I said, you're just the person I wanted to meet. And he said, how so? And I said, I want to be in your magazine. And he said, I don't think so, Miss March. And I said, oh, I think so. And he says, we've never had anyone in burlesque. I said, I play golf. He said, a lot of people play golf. And I said, I have an 8 handicap in golf. And he looked at me dumbfounded. And he couldn't believe it. He said, I really doubt that. I said, oh, yes. I said, if you go out on a golf course with me, I think I will beat you by several strokes. So he thought about it. He didn't promise me, but a couple of weeks went by, and he got in touch with my agent at that time in New York, Dave Cohen, and set up a playtime at the Westchester Country Club in Yonkers.
Yes, I know where it's at.
And I went out, I played a round of golf, and I beat the associate editor that he had sent out there. I beat him by 3 strokes. So needless to say, I got my little write-up and my pictures in Sports Illustrated. So I feel very fortunate to be the only one in burlesque that was ever in Sports Illustrated.
And when did that issue? When did that come out?
That was in, gee whiz, 64, I think.
64?
64, I believe it was. Yeah. I think it was right around the same time that I did Timepiece for Jim Henson. I was in the choreo show that 6 weeks before going to Wildwood, New Jersey, at the Manor Hotel for the Minsky show. So I think it was right around that period of time. And then in '84, I had the distinction of being one of 5 women that was roasted by the Circus Saints and Sinners in Wayne, New Jersey. Usually they roasted prominent male sports figures.
Right.
So the only women they had ever roasted was Gypsy Rose Lee, Ann Corio, Elizabeth Taylor, Edie Gourmet, and myself. So that was a big plus. Plus, I also am the only woman to take a burlesque show into the Irvine Auditorium for the University of Pennsylvania. And that interview went quite well. I usually, on all interviews, I never wore anything, with the decollage, with the breast hanging out.
Right.
And I never wore a lot of makeup. I just looked like simple but well dressed. And I went for the interview with the dean and some of the others, and he approved of me and said, "Let's do the show." So I did, and it went over quite well. So that was good publicity.
Well, let's talk about your book that's coming out soon.
Okay.
Once the book comes out, we'd love to have you back on again to promote it some more.
Yes.
Now, you personify class and sophistication.
Right.
But I need to know, with this autobiography, with your memoirs, are there any salacious stories in there?
Oh, you're going to have to read the book.
Well, you got to give us a teaser.
There's a lot. Well, Elizabeth Taylor and I had the same amount of husbands.
Okay, all right.
The only thing is she wound up with the jewels, and I wound up with the divorces.
Okay. Well, see, it's the internet, and I don't know. That's why I'm waiting for the book to come out. I don't know if what I'm reading on the internet, how much of it is actually true. So I don't want to throw it at you as if it were fact.
Everything in that book is going to be true. My engagement to Mel Torme, my dating Joe Dimaggio.
Well, okay.
Dating with mafia men. And,
well, hang on. I'm going to get to all of that right now. Joe Dimaggio. Okay. Was Joe Dimaggio swinging a big bat?
Joe Dimaggio was a very shy, gentlemanly, wonderful, wonderful man that was always and still was to his death in love with Marilyn Monroe. And he wouldn't go to any function that the Kennedys or any of the Rat Pack went to because he blamed all of them for her death. So, but he was just a wonderful man. He was fun to pal around with. His favorite drinks was Bloody Marys and Dom Perignon champagne, which happens to be my favorite drink. But since the open heart surgery 14 years ago, and being on Coumadin and having a titanium aortic valve replacement,
oh my!
I'm not supposed to drink. However, the doctor says a glass of wine once in a while. Well, when I open a bottle of wine, I don't just have a glass full. I have like 3. But I figure once in a while it's not going to hurt me. And I had to have the April March First Lady cocktail.
Well, of course you had to have that, sure.
Yes,
you just didn't need 10 of them, that's all. You don't need to drink 10 of them, just the one is fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so you're not going to give us any dirt on Joe Dimaggio. You're just going to say he's a nice guy.
Yeah, he was a very nice guy.
Okay. Well, and then, of course, you were involved with Mel Torme.
Yes.
So that's almost at the other end of the spectrum. Here you've got a sports star, one of the biggest ever, Joe Dimaggio, and then you're at the other end of the spectrum, you've got Mel Torme.
Yeah, well, Mel was very egotistical. He was a genius and quite a singer. I still listen to his music. I just couldn't see myself married to him. I dated him and became engaged to him, and I just wasn't in love with him.
You got cold feet and said no thanks.
I got cold feet, and I dated a lot of singers. I dated Tommy Leonetti. I dated Hank Thompson, the country western singer. I dated way before your time, Russell Arms from the old Hit Parade show.
Okay, yeah.
I dated, it seemed to me I liked singers a little bit. But,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mel Torme, Let's see, Joe Dimaggio, and there was one thing that knocked me for a loop. I'm going to throw the name at you, and you let me know if this is correct or not. Wilbur Mills.
Oh, Wilbur Mills, I gave him to Fanny Fox.
You gave him?
I gave him to Fanny Fox. I got rid of him. I let her go jump in the tidal basin.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Here's the thing. This is what gets me. And you dodged so many bullets in your career, and this is one of them. Because when I read your book, a little bit of the profile I saw online, I said Wilbur Mills. Now, for people who aren't old enough to remember, Wilbur Mills was a senator.
He was the head of the House Ways and Means
House
Committee.
Ways and Committee.
In other words, the second, most important person after the president.
Exactly, and you were dating him.
Well, I didn't date him. He wanted to date me.
Okay.
He came into the Silver Slipper nightclub every night in Washington, D.C., and he was always drunk. And,
yes.
Well, he was an alcoholic.
Yes.
The poor man, he was an alcoholic.
He was an alcoholic, and you pushed him off to Fanny Fox.
Oh, I pushed him off onto Fanny. I couldn't tolerate him.
So
I was, I don't know. I turned down so many opportunities. I don't know whether I was stupid or I don't know. It's just
I don't know if you
I
were.
Was me. I was me.
You were fun. You. What is it? You danced to the beat of a different drummer. That's what it was.
Exactly. In other words, I lived my life like the song says. Had a lot of regrets, but I still did it my way.
Exactly. Well, quickly, for Wilbur Mills, I want to bring everybody up to speed on that. You pushed him off to Fanny Fox, who was also a burlesque star.
Yeah, she was on the show. I was the star of the show at the Silver Slipper.
And I guess
she was one of the girls that was in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And she was just one of the girls on the show.
And so Wilbur's infatuated with Fanny now. They're in a car, and they're driving through D.C., and they get pulled over by the police.
Right.
And Wilbur is drunk. He's intoxicated. He's the head of the House Ways and Means Committee. And he's in a car with a striptease right, Fanny Fox. Now, what people don't realize, because I remember this story as a child, this was the Monica Lewinsky story of its day.
Oh, definitely.
It was huge.
Definitely. I mean, and she was. I tell you, she was the Argentina firecracker.
That's right.
And I tell you, those girls from South America. They certainly knew how to get publicity. They were publicity happy.
Well, I don't know what transpired, but they pull over Wilbur. He's clearly drunk, and I guess they went to go question Fanny, who was sitting in the passenger seat. She jumps out of the car and jumps into a ravine.
Well, there just so happened to be photographers around.
Right. Oh, that's right. That's right.
I think the whole thing was kind of planned.
Yeah, it was kind of set up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and poor Wilbur, it was just this big political embarrassment, and Fanny, of course, just became an overnight pop culture sensation. If nobody heard of her before then, they certainly heard of her then.
Yeah.
Because of that incident, and it was just a huge scandal. And when I read that you were linked to him, I mean, in some ways, you could have been in that passenger seat, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, it could have been you and not Fanny. So it was a huge story, and actually, it kind of has a happy ending because Wilbur came out publicly and acknowledged his alcoholism, which a lot of people wouldn't do back then. Nobody wanted to admit they were drunk, so. He spent the rest of his life counseling alcoholics, trying to get people to drive. So it kind of has a happy ending, but the impact, the ramifications of that story and on his political career, I just remember as a small boy because I would watch the news on television, and my mother always had Life magazine and Time and Newsweek and all that. So I would read that, and it was a really bbig story of its day, scandal, real big scandal.
Yes, it was.
So I'm finding out that you are linked to it, and I just had to get a chuckle out of that. I was like,
yeah, it was interesting time. It was an interesting time. More interesting time, of course, was when I met King Saud of Saudi Arabia.
That was my next question.
That was your next question.
Exactly. I got these people. Our listeners they've got to hear this. I don't mean to interrupt, but the setup is King Farouk is the leader of he's the king of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Okay, and this is back in. I'm sorry. Let's set the time frame.
This was also in the. This was in the 60s.
So during the Johnson administration.
It was. I can't even remember. All I remember is I was working the Piccadilly Club in Miami Beach.
Right.
I can look on a newspaper thing and get the date.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we'll set the time frame.
But many things happened that I did, and I threw all of my contracts away years ago. I didn't think I'd ever need them, and I sure need them now.
Exactly.
The names of different clubs, agents, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I met him. I was co-starring at the Piccadilly Club in Miami Beach with Blaze Starr, and how the meeting with the king came about is Prince Mansur and Prince Thamer, which were two of his favorite sons out of about 120 some odd children.
Right.
They came into the club one night. Now they were all staying in Palm Beach, and the king wouldn't come to Miami because of the Jewish people. He didn't like Jewish people.
Right. Well, it's Miami Beach.
And right.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the two princes, Prince Mansur and Prince Thamer, did with about 19 or 20 aides and bodyguards. And they sat at a long table, and I did my show. Blaze did her show. I did my show. I was the only one. They didn't want Blaze at the table. They wanted me, which made Blaze a little unhappy because if you remember, well, I can say this. Blaze was with a governor. I was with a king. So
that's right.
I got a one-upper.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's right.
And anyway, I met the two princes, and I sat and I joined them for a couple of drinks, and they invited me to lunch in Palm Beach the following day, and I said, sure, and they sent two limousines to pick me up, one to carry me in and the other in the back with bodyguards, and drove me to Palm Beach, went to the big hotel and had lunch with Prince Mansur and Prince Thamer and sat and played checkers all afternoon with them. And I gave them autographed photos, and not knowing that they were going to show their father. And I went back. They sent me back in the limousine to Miami Beach because I had to do my shows that night. So a couple of days went by, and I got an invitation for an audience with the king himself. And I thought, oh my goodness, I definitely wanted to meet a king. I'd never been with a king in my whole life. So I said, sure. There was a fellow by the name of Becca Yunus who was the king's personal representative.
Okay.
And he spoke fluent English. And so he's the one that got in touch with me. Well, somehow, I don't know, there was a fellow from our government called Frank Malhas that originally was from Saudi Arabia, but he worked for our government, I guess the CIA, whatever. Anyway, he called up at the club one evening because they didn't have my home phone number, and actually I didn't even know of the man. And he asked if he could meet with me. And he said it was very important that he had to give me something before he knew that I was going for a meeting with King Saud in Palm Beach.
Right.
So anyway, I met with Mr. Malhas, and he gave me a letter, a sealed letter, that he said was very important that they hadn't been able to get it through to the king, and so he was relying on me to do so. And, of course, the letter was sealed, and he told me a few words in Arabic to give. He said, don't turn loose of that letter to anybody. You have to give it to the king himself. So I figured, oh, holy crow, what the heck is all this about?
What have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, what have I got myself into? So I took the letter with me, and again, limousines were sent, but this time I had 4 bodyguards in the limo with me, and they had like swords. I mean, it was like movie stuff, you know, that you don't think of anything. And I took my press agent, Cy Shapiro, who happens to be Jewish,
right?
And I took it. They wouldn't let him out of the car, and he had to stay in the limousine. When I went into, the king didn't stay in a hotel. He and I think 4 or 5 of his favorite wives they were leasing some millionaire's mansion or something in Palm Beach, and he had come over. The king, while he was over here, he had come over. He had a eye operation at the hospital in Boston.
Yes,
and he also had an appendectomy done that nobody knew. They just thought he was over here for the eye operation. But anyway, I left the limousine and was ushered into a sitting room in this mansion. And now Frank Malhoff had told me, don't drink anything. No water, no tea, no coffee, no nothing. Don't drink anything because they might put something in it, you know.
They might spike your drink and you could wake up in Riyadh or something.
Exactly.
Oh, my.
So, anyway, I was thirsty, my mouth was dry, and oh, my goodness, but I didn't dare order it. Becca Eunice came into the room, asked if I wanted anything, and I said, no, thank you, and I was just dying of thirst. But anyway, he said that I had to curtsy when the king came into the room. Now, again, there was like about 20, 25 bodyguards, all sitting in chairs and everything in this big, big banquet room. So anyway, he showed me how to curtsy, and he told me, now make sure that you don't sit down before the king. The king has to sit first, and then you sit afterwards. So I said, okay. So anyway, I left the little room that I was in and went into this big, like, ballroom-type big room, and I saw all these men sitting in these chairs and everything. Well, then all of a sudden, like, the king walked in. He was in robes, like, you know, with the desert.
Typical
attire.
Saudi garb, yeah.
Yeah. And so, of course, all the aides and everything, they stood, and I was standing there already, and I was, like, shaking like a leaf. And I must have been perspiring. I was a nervous wreck. So anyway, I did remember when he got over to me, I curtsied, and I felt like I was going to fall over. And I was so, I was afraid of losing my balance. I sat down. Well, there was a big commotion because I sat down before the king.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, all he did was he patted me on the head, and he said he didn't speak English. Becca Eunice interpreted everything. So anyway, I saw his eyes were watering. Finally, he sat down on the sofa next to me, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, I was just shaking away. And anyway, I took out a Kleenex from my purse, and I'm dabbing at his eyes, saying, poor king, like you'd say to a dog, you know,
right.
And dabbing at his eyes, and he thought that was sweet, I guess. And he asked Becca Eunice to ask me where I was from. He wanted to make sure I wasn't Jewish.
Oh, right, yeah.
I told him I was from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and, I told Becca Eunice, and he translated it, and that I was English, Irish, and Indian. So he was quite happy with that. So we conversed, back and forth, the interpretation, blah, 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 blah. He said he had seen my photographs that his sons had showed him, and he said I was very beautiful, and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, I remembered I had that damn letter
right
stuck down my bra, So I pulled it out, and it was a little damp because I had perspired so much, So anyway, I said, Maktub min Farouk Malhoff, letter from Frank Malhoff. I'll never forget those words as long as I live. And I gave that letter to the king. He opened it, read it. Oh my God! He started screaming. He was and shouting, and everybody. Oh my goodness! It was pandemonium. And I thought, oh, my goodness, what the heck is in that letter? And his ambassador, Abraham, glared at me. The ambassador, Abraham, didn't like me at all. And anyway, the letter was read, and anyway, after the ranting and raving, he asked Becca Eunice to ask me if I would go with him the next day back to Saudi Arabia and to Mallorca, to his castle in Mallorca, Spain. I said, oh, I don't know about that. But now, in the meantime, dollar signs are clicking in my brain.
Right.
All this publicity, you know. So anyway, I said, I had a daughter, and I said, I'll have to let Becca Eunice know the following morning, you know, and they said it was very important because the plane was taken off late in the afternoon, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I went back out, and I was worried to death about Cy, wondering if he was still in that limo. Well, I got out there. He had been out there all that time. And so anyway, with nothing to drink or anything either.
Yeah.
So we were driven back to Miami Beach. And when I got back to Miami Beach, where they let me off, well, I met with Frank Malhoff, and he asked about the letter, and I said I gave it to him. Then I told Frank Malhoff that I was invited to go to Saudi Arabia and Mallorca, Spain. And he said, April, you can't go. And I said, but it's $1 million worth of publicity. And he said, you can't go, and you can't use the publicity now. There's an airspace that they needed in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And the king was granted the United States the use of that air base as long as no Jewish soldiers or anything was on that air base.
Right, right.
And so anyway, he said, you can't go because you can't do this publicity. You can't say anything about that. You can't do anything now. And we wouldn't have, if you got over there, he said, chances are you would never get back. And he said, once the king tired of you, you'd be just thrown to the wolves. So he said, we can't protect you, and I advise you can't go. And I'm saying, but I want to go. All that publicity. I said, oh, my goodness, you know. And he says, that if I were you, I can't tell you no, but he said, you know, you have no protection. So I didn't go, you know. But I got a beautiful, the king had asked me what I wanted, and I wanted gold coins and a white ermine coat. And I got all of that, and all my jewels and everything was stolen at this motel room that I had in Miami Beach, and it was stolen. 3 bad things happened. Well, the murder, the shooting at the Place Pigalle,
right.
Then I was robbed. Then I was arrested for doing a belly dance. I didn't take a stitch of clothing off. And I said, the 3rd time is not a charm. I think it's time for me to get out of nightclubs and go into theaters. So that's when I decided to go on the theater circuit. And I naturally turned the trip down with the king. But I can say, geez, I was with a king. You know,
well, yeah, and I think
princes and a king.
Yeah, and I agree with the gentleman that when he says forget about the publicity because it could have turned into negative publicity if nobody ever saw you again.
Exactly.
You know, and then you're talking Saudi Arabia, and it's still. I mean, the women are lower.
It's still probably.
Oh yeah, the women are lower than dogs over there. I mean, it's just it's horrendous the culture, the oppression, and I like you said, I think once the king gets tired of you, you would have been thrown to the trash heap, and you know, so it would have been difficult. But here you are. You know, you're also aside from Mel Torme and Joe Dimaggio and performing on Broadway, you're now a courier for the State Department. You know, so that's just it. The State Department's trying to figure out how to set up some sort of diplomatic tie with this guy. They're trying to open communications and keep those communications open, and they set their sights on you, and they're like, we know what the king likes.
Perfect opportunity.
We know what the king's sons like, so they used you as a courier, and to this day we don't know what was in that letter.
No, all I know is a few years later, Prince Mansur and Prince Thamer, who were lovely young men, they were both assassinated, and that Abraham that glared at me, that didn't like me, the ambassador, was beheaded. So I often wonder if it was something that was in that letter. Oh, I asked Becca Eunice to ask the king when he asked me something, what I would like to have, you know.
Right.
I really wanted his ring, the seal, you know.
Okay.
He wouldn't give it to me. I couldn't have the king. And all it was just like a plain little, like, wooden type ring, but it was his seal. You know, he sealed stuff with that ring.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But that's what I wanted, but didn't get it.
No.
I met so many funny people. Like I met the president of the Mariana Islands. He was there. President Reagan was president at the time. And he came in, again, I was at the Silver Slipper performing, and this little man with this little plaid tam with a pom-pom on the top and this mismatched clothing came in. Funny-looking little man. I figured, you know, he looked Hawaiian.
Right.
But he was the president of the Mariana Islands, and he had been with a meeting with Reagan that day. And he asked the waitress to ask if I would join him after he saw my show. So I joined him, and he asked me, I mean, here's this funny-looking little man. Nobody would go out with this. He was just a funny-looking little man that was really, you know, dressed terribly. He asked me to go and have dinner with him the following night. And I felt sorry for him. And I figured, geez, you know, well, why not, you know? So we went to Trader Vic's at the Hilton Hotel. And he was charming. And I got I gave him my address, and he said that he was going to send me a gift when he got back to the Mariana Islands. So he did. He sent me a pocketbook that was made out of palm leaves, and along with a letter inviting me to visit with him in the Mariana Islands. Mm-hmm. And he told me there was that he owned the only store and bar and everything on this island, right? And he said there's no TV, no radio, no, you know, movie theater, no nothing. And I said, well,
what's the point?
He was going to teach me how to spearfish. And he said, and you don't have to bring many clothes. And I said, what do you mean I don't have to bring many clothes? He said, because the women, they only wear grass skirts. And I said,
yeah, that's right, yeah.
I'll be darned. Well, anyway, I didn't go there either. But for many years, I received letters from that Frank Mulhouse, and also from this funny little man, president of the Mariana Islands. So I've had quite a life of meeting odd, interesting people.
Well, yeah, odd and interesting, but you have this seduction about you where men just fall in love with you. I mean, let's be honest. Men just fall in love with you. They go to the Silver Slipper and they see your act and they're just enamored by you, and they have to have you, whether they're kings or presidents of the Marianas or playing for the Yankees.
I don't know what it is. I just like people, and I like being nice to them. You know, I like being a nice person, and I like people, whether they're funny looking or, you know, who they are.
What was your favorite song to perform to?
Oh my gosh, I used the April tunes for so long. I kind of got tired of doing the April tunes. I guess I like pretty things like Speak Low, Spellbound. My prop number for the stockings and the garter belt was Barefoot Contessa most of the time. And, of course, I used that special tune, that Blues for April. And I liked stuff like Girl from Ipanema and Fever and, you know, stuff like that. I wasn't into the real, like, seductive type music. I like pretty music.
Okay, so the David Rose, the stripper song, and the Alvino Ray. What's that? Oh, Night Train. Night Train.
I used those, but back in the day before I became First Lady of Burlesque. Like when I first started out, I used stuff like that, Night Train and Temptation, and you know that kind. But then I gravitated toward the pretty stuff.
So you
And,
you were able to create your own song list, set list, so to speak. So whenever you traveled and played at clubs, you'd say, "This is the music that I want."
Yes, I had manuscript music. I still got that doggone stuff, except some of the. When I retired, the Silver Slipper was the last place I worked in Washington D.C., and I forgot to collect or check my music when the band leader gave it to me, and I'm missing a lot of parts. So,
well, whatever you have left, you should definitely scan it and post it, and let people get a glimpse into the workings, the behind the scenes workings of your act as well. I mean, that's interesting. Do you have any of the old get-ups? Any of the old clothes?
Oh yeah, I sold like the real elaborate ones and everything. I sold all of them, but I still have like 4 or 5. You know, I sold my prop. But in Boston, Scratch, that has the Boston Baby Dolls and runs the Boston Burlesque Expo every April, he made a prop to resemble my prop that he used when Miss Mina did the tribute number to me this year. And they made it without, telling me, and it was quite a surprise. So,
well, you know the saying that everything old is new again?
Yes.
Yeah, so here you have all this stuff, and you're retired from the business, and you're saying, oh, why is this? It's just taking up space, and it's clutter, I need to get rid of it, I'll sell it, I'll do this. Lo and behold, social media rears its head, and people are contacting you and saying, oh, tell us about it. Oh, where's your outfits? Where's this? Where's that? And you're thinking, why did I get rid of that stuff?
I know. I must have 100 pair of high-heel shoes that I don't dare put on a pair of 5-inch heels or even 4-inch heels anymore. Because the bad back and the heart problems and the this, oh my God, it's hell to get old.
Stick to flats. Stick to flats.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you, gangsters, okay? Let's talk about gangsters.
Okay.
Now, here's the beauty about your book, okay, is that all of these men, all of these people who were enamored by you, who dated you, who married you, I don't know about the husbands. I won't go that far, but they're all dead. They're all deceased, and you get the last word.
Yeah.
So that's the great thing, is that you get the last word. So what?
Exactly.
All right, I'll throw a name out there, and you tell me if I'm wrong. Sam Giancana?
Nope, never met him.
Never met him. Okay.
Nope.
Okay, because I was going to say that you must have had indirectly had a hand in getting Kennedy elected then, if you were dating Sam Giancana. So
yeah. Nope.
All right, so I won't go there.
Wasn't that who was that woman? There was a brunette woman.
Judith Exner.
Yes.
Judith Exner. I was going to ask if you were at cross paths with Judith and you and Sam.
No,
okay.
No, I met Liz Renee. She was starring at the Pilgrim Theater in Boston. I opened the Pilgrim Theater, and then I went back to it. Liz Renee, that had been a gangster's mall, and did a few films, was performing there, and she closed one night, and I opened the following day. So I got in there a day early, so I got to meet Liz Renee, who was a beautiful, lovely person. I didn't know her that well, but I liked her. She was very sweet, very ladylike, very kind. Didn't do too much of a burlesque act, but she didn't have to. I mean, she was infamous.
Right.
I knew Candy Bar. Candy Bar and I started in the business at the same time.
That's a great stage name too. You got to admit, Candy Bar.
Yeah, Candy. Yeah. She was a beautiful girl. Candy Bar was just completely. She just didn't lead her life right.
Okay.
But Barney Weinstein put me into show business at the Theater Lounge and gave me the name April March. And Barney's brother Abe, who owned the Colony Club in downtown Dallas, put Candy Bar into the business and named her Candy Bar. But Candy Bar had been a prostitute and on drugs and et cetera, et cetera.
Oh.
Well, you name it, she did it all. And that was her downfall. Then she got messed up with the mafia.
Yeah.
Me, I had lunch with them. I played gin rummy with them, but I turned down every single offer of them wanting to further my career.
Okay, so you didn't date the wise guys.
I didn't want to be obligated, you know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's once you're in, you're in. Once you're obligated,
right.
That's the problem. You can't get out.
No.
Okay, so you never dated them. You never had relationships with the Dons or anything like that. Okay.
Well, I dated, but I can't remember in Chicago when I went to Chicago for Wardrobe from Tony Midnight and Pictures by Maurice Seymour. The gangster that took over Al Capone's thing, I don't know. He came in and took a liking to me, and all of a sudden I was working the 606 Club. I went in there only for a few weeks to get the wardrobe and the pictures. Well, anyway, it was 7 days a week, and all of a sudden this big mafia man took a liking to me, and all of a sudden I had Sundays off. And all of a sudden I was there permanently. I wasn't there just for a few-week engagement. And I had my Sundays off, and I would go to dinner, and that mafia man taught me how to play gin rummy. So anyway, I was followed. I was followed to my hotel every night by a couple of guys that I guess he sent to keep tabs on me. And I met this policeman that came into the club. Well, at that time, back in the 50s, and everybody, they were on the take, you know.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, this young policeman told me, I was telling him the story, and you know that I wanted to leave Chicago, but they said I couldn't leave. So he told me to start taking my wardrobe out a little bit at a time each night, like hiding it under my coat and everything, because it was winter time. And I had my car parked in the garage next to the 606 Club. So that's what I did. And on the final night, he said, like, leave one or two costumes, you know, and don't bother to get your pay. And he said, leave, get to that hotel. If those gangsters are following you, he said, arrange he said that he would go that night, and he would get my car out of the garage where I parked it, and I walked from the garage to the hotel because these gangsters always watched me. So the young policeman stayed where my car was, and he knew that I was already packed, so we waited until the gangsters, like, they saw me turn the light off in the hotel room,
right.
Blah, blah, blah. So anyway, after they were no longer around, I guess they told their boss, you know, I was settled in and going to bed and the light was out, blah, blah. So anyway, I picked up my little dog Beep Beep, a little toy Manchester I had, and I went downstairs and out through the kitchen because I had told the guy at the desk that I was going to be leaving and not to tell anybody, and I would leave the key to the room in the room, and I had to go out that back entrance where the policeman, you know, I took the luggage down, and I got in the car, and I had bought some no-dose pills, and he had a thermos full of black coffee for me, and he said, just drive and keep driving. Don't stop,
look back.
Don't look back. And do you know I've never been to Chicago since?
That was my next question, if you ever went back to Chicago.
No. Isn't that amazing?
Oh,
no.
My God.
No.
So if it isn't Saudi kings trying to kidnap you and you know, make you their sex slave, it's Chicago dance. It's Chicago gangsters.
Oh yeah, I thought it was all comic book stuff. You know, the Chicago thing. But back in those days, like there was in Cicero and everything, like girlfriends of mobsters and everything, or if the girls didn't do what the mobster guys wanted them to do, they'd throw lye in their face.
Oh yeah, it was not easy.
Name them. So I said, oh, no. Chicago isn't for me. You know, so.
Well, you played Dallas, didn't you?
I played Dallas.
Okay,
yeah.
so did you ever cross paths with Jack Ruby?
No, he called me when I was working at the Theater Lounge and becoming, you know, a little bit of a name. He called me to go to work for him, but I had already been told that he was a horrible person. So I said, no, I'm very happy where I am. So, no, I never
crossed paths with him. Yeah, horrible person, but apparently very patriotic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
In the end, he was very patriotic. So,
exactly.
Okay, so so you never crossed paths with Jack Ruby then?
No.
So all right, so what's next for you?
what's next for me? Well, the book, the drink is out. Oh, I think I'm going to have some T-shirts made up and some cards with my picture on one side and drink on the other.
Oh, yes.
And I met this young woman. Again, boy, a lot of good things have been happening to me in Toronto. I met this Sandra Roberts, who is the editor-publisher of a magazine in Canada and parts of the U.S. called Pie, P-I-E.
Okay.
And this month's issue, she went to California and went to the Hefner Mansion and interviewed Hugh Hefner. So he's on the cover of her magazine this month. And she also interviewed Dita Von Teese, and she asked Dita Von Teese who her inspiration was. And do you believe Dita Von Teese said, she named two people, I can't remember the first one, and me. and I told Sandra, I said, when Sandra was doing an interview with me on the 2nd, she did an interview with me on the 2nd of this month. And she said, I said, I didn't even know that Dita Von Teese knew me. And and she looked at me and she said, April, everybody knows you. And I said, I'll be darned. So then I said something nice about Dita because I'm going to be in the November issue of Pie magazine, which is a very, very nice book. No nudie book. It's like a high-end magazine.
Okay.
Excuse me. So she, like I said, she did the interview, and so I've got that magazine coming out. And then Caitlin Rieger, pardon me again, had the drink made up for me, and she's going to be filming a documentary. And I haven't talked to Leslie Zemeckis, but, I told this Sandra that I would like to get some book signings for like maybe Borders and Barnes & Noble.
Right, of course.
She said, no problem, because her being a publisher and editor, you know, she's got the connections. She can, get you in there. Right. And then Caitlin has very good connections because she sent this 2-hour interview to somebody in TV. She had just done a thing for the Oprah network. And she sent this tape of the interview with me, and she said, April, they accepted it. They love your stories. And I said, but I only did a 2-hour interview. She said that was enough. So when she gets back from London, she wants to do further things with me. So you know, who the heck knows? I mean, maybe 2012 is going to be a really good year, hopefully.
It's just that I for one, just with the information that I've seen on the internet, was fascinated with you. So I can't wait to get a hold of the book. I mean, I just, you know, and we have to have you back on again because I still have many, 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 many questions to ask. But, you know, I want the book to come out first. I want people to get a hold of it. I'm going to get a copy of it, and just, you know, sure, cards and T-shirts and promote the recipe for your drink. That'd be great. So, of course, you can do that on your page. You're more than welcome to send it to us, and we'll post it on our pages as well.
Very good.
I, you know, for the past week of doing research on you, I have searched high and low, and I've looked under every rock I possibly could to find some dirt on you, to find someone who had a bad word to say about you, and I couldn't find one person who had a bad thing to say about April March.
Boy, that's terrific.
With the exception now of your daughter, Cerise.
Yeah.
Now, you traumatized your daughter. This is it. This is the only dirt that I have on you. Your daughter, you told your daughter when she was in the 8th grade that if she studied hard and got good grades, you would get her a guitar. Well, she claims that she studied hard and got the good grades, but you welched on the guitar.
I welched on the guitar.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all we got on you.
Oh,
but
that's funny.
But she seems to have gotten over it. So
that's funny. We got to mention my granddaughter, Nicole Cerise. She's a very, very good hairstylist, makeup artist. Oh my goodness, you name it. she's got a wonderful website. It's Nicole Cerise, and she works in this upscale salon in Lawrenceville, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And she's married to a wonderful young man called Matt Evantoff. And he's in politics. He's a strategist and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So his office is in Princeton, and they just got married 5 years ago. And so I've got to mention Nicole, or she'll be mad at Grandma.
By all means, sure, by all means.
I let her. She saw me on stage for the first time in Las Vegas 2 years ago. Both of my daughter Cerise, I never let her watch me perform until she was 21 years old.
Oh, that was a question I never got around to asking. Is your children? How did you break it to your children as to what you did for a living?
They knew what I did, but
they just never saw
you. Yeah, no, my daughter, and I turned down all. I never made any burlesque film, and now I wish I had of, because everybody is asking, for burlesque film. And I turned down like a nudie movie, walking through a nudist camp, and that was back in the early 70s, so Blaze Starr did that.
Oh, I saw that. I have a copy of that.
Yeah, just walking through sniffing the flowers.
That's
right?
it. Doris. Yeah, it was directed by a woman named Doris Wishman. My wife and I watched it, and it is such a hoot.
Yeah,
I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but it is such a hoot to watch it, because in its day it was risque.
Yeah.
But you look at it today, and it's just silly fun.
Yeah,
you know.
Right.
And so it was amazing. We watched Blaze Starr, and we're just thinking, okay, they didn't hire her for her acting, so they hired her because she's
right. Walk through. And then too, I have the distinction of being one of the very few that never had a breast enlargement. So, were women getting in breast augmentations back then? Back 30, 40 years ago? Back in the 60s. Yeah, back in the 60s it started in.
Okay.
And I did a show with Christine Jorgensen. She was the first woman to have a sex change.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I did a club date with her in Oklahoma City years ago. So, oh my gosh, there's just so much to say.
Well, there is. There's much more that we need to discuss, and we would love to have you on again in the future. If you're willing to do so, we would love to talk to you again.
I'd love to, Mick. I really appreciate you asking me to do this.
I mean, it's an absolute joy talking to you, and I knew the stories that you have to tell. I know we're just scratching the surface, and it's really the tip of the iceberg. Her name is April March, and she is considered the First Lady of Burlesque. She has a book. When is the book coming out?
The book should be out sometime in next month. Dan, I just finished up. I finished taping like the last 5 years of my life, and I gave it to Dan to put together, add that to the manuscript and everything.
So sometime in November, the book will be out, and it is called The First Lady of Burlesque, The Memoirs of April March. And we look forward to getting a copy and reading it, and again, having you back on the air. April March, thank you for appearing on the Mick Show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mick. It was my pleasure, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Please do. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. The one, the only, April March. Now, was that an education for you or what?
She was pretty cool.
Yeah. I just, like I said, we were just scratching the surface with her career and everything that she's encountered. So, again, thank you to April March, and we will go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll be back after that. You are listening to The Mick Show.